change the policy. And that's what we need to do. When we mess up, we need to, apologies maybe are worthwhile sometimes, but what we need to do is recognize mistakes and change it. If foreign policy is flawed, we have to change the foreign policy. We have literally driven so many in the Middle East into the arms of the Iranians. Here we are about ready to go to war against the Iranians, but we're driving them into the arms of the Iranians. The Iraqis are closer. They're all Shiites now. The Shiites are in charge of Iraq. And, Saddam Hussein, as bad as he was, at least he didn't get along with the Ayatollah, and there was a balance of power there. So in Pakistan now, we've been, we have this schizophrenic attitude with Pakistan. We give them billions of dollars at the same time we send drone missiles over there and killing innocent people, and they get a little upset with us. But guess what? We're telling them what to do, and they have to do this, and they're getting tired of it. And what they want to do is they want to get a closer alignment with the Iranians. The Iranians want a closer alignment with the Chinese. So all this, at the same time, we live beyond our means, we spend excessively, we buy cheap goods from the Chinese. They now have about $1.5 trillion of our dollars. They're buying them less frequently now, but guess what? They're investing them. They're not investing in war. They're investing in buying oil wells and natural resources in countries where we're occupied, like Afghanistan. They're literally going in there, and even in Iraq and Iran, and they're acting too much like capitalists to me, as far as I'm concerned. But I think we're so foolish. I think the foreign policy has to be changed, and that's where the $1 trillion that I want to cut, I'd start with overseas spending and bring that. But all the troops should be brought home. They should be brought home from Germany and Japan. And there are programs, certainly we need to take care of the veterans, but there are programs that we should try to salvage. They're bankrupt right now. Medicare and Social Security, they're bankrupt. And at the rate we're going, at the rate we're spending, the dollar will collapse and the money won't work and everybody's going to be really hurt. So my idea is cutting this $1 trillion, and you have to cut something domestically and overseas. But you've got to have priorities. And for me, are the people that have become dependent on the federal government, which they should never in the first place, but they are, and we should start with cutting that. And that is child health care, and medical care for the elderly, and Social Security. And we can do this with cutting. If we want to cut, we might be able to save Social Security. If we won't cut, I think we're in a lot more trouble than anybody really wants. So that is the main reason why I want to emphasize how necessary it is to cut the spending. One of the other things about what we're facing today is the undermining of our personal liberties. Whether it's the war overseas, back in our history, whether it was the Civil War, World War I, or World War II, look at what we did to the Japanese Americans and put them in concentration camps. And most of the time we back off from that. But now we're in a war that's been declared. It's preemptive war, and it's worldwide. It's against a force called terrorism. Terrorism, people who commit crimes. And so many people who we're trying to kill right now are called Taliban. And Taliban were our allies when the Soviets were in Afghanistan. And their people, they're not part of the Al-Qaeda. They're not planning to come here. Al-Qaeda gets so angry they do want to come here. But the Taliban are individuals, despite their religious beliefs and everything else. To me, that's not our business. But the Taliban really motivates people by saying, let's throw all the foreigners out, whether they're the Russians or the Americans, and we ought to try to understand it from their viewpoint as well. But under these circumstances, whether it's that kind of war, or whether it's a war on drugs, that introduces the notion that government, police, and FBI and SWAT teams have now licensed to come into our house without proper search warrants. And that was one of the reasons we fought a revolution, is to keep the king's army from busting into the houses of the colonies. and that was the Patriot Act that should have never been passed. It should be repealed. I think that the Patriot Act would have never been passed if they called it repeal the Fourth Amendment Act. Maybe they would have voted against it. So when we get ready to repeal it, we're not going to say it's the repeal of the Patriot Act because people like to be patriotic. I think it's an unpatriotic act. But what we should call the bill is Restore the Fourth Amendment Act. This attitude that allows, the type of treatment that we all get at airports. We don't need the TSA pretending they're making us safer. We're not safer because the TSA undermines our personal liberty, violates our personal property and our persons themselves. And they say this is done all to make us safe and secure. I think it's a dream. I think it's misled, and unfortunately, it just teaches us to once again be obedient to the state. Just as the income tax is obedience to the state, the TSA makes us obedient and marching on. There's another effort that really tells you about who owns our lives, and it's on the books. It's not being used now, unfortunately, but I was on the receiving end of this, and that is the military draft. The military draft says that you can be enslaved to fight a war, even if it's unconstitutional, undeclared, whether it was the Korean War, a Vietnam War, or whatever. It's still in the books. Young people have to register, and I think if we truly had a republic, and we truly cherished our liberties, we would all fight to defend our country, and we wouldn't need